Very funny.
Sit through it.
Am I supposed to show my face?
There was Emily, I think. Emily was asking if she should show her face. Yes, yeah, we're happy for Emily to show her face.
Tell her that's enough. That's your sister, I know.
All right, are we ready to
Kennedy.
start? Okay, great. All right, welcome everyone to Harry Hendon's Retirement Symposium. So my name is Julie Arblaster, and I have known Harry for only about 20 years, so not very long compared to a lot of the people in this room. But I'm really honoured to MC this event today. So before I begin, I want to make an acknowledgement of countries. So I want to acknowledge the people of the Kulin Nations on this land we're gathered today, and give my respects to their elders past and present, and for those online, acknowledge the elders of the local lands in which they're living. So we're here to celebrate Harry's stellar career, which includes things like being a fellow of the American Geophysical Union, which you'll see the photos on the invitation. But I thought for some people who are tuning in, some students, they may not know all the intricacies of Harry's career. So Harry hails from California, but got his PhD from the University of Washington in Seattle in 1985, sorry. And then in 1985, he came to CSIRO, where he worked with Eun-Pa Lim in a postdoc, and met his wonderful wife, Sharon. And then in 1988, he moved to Boulder, Colorado, to the University of Colorado, worked with Hendon and Salby. And then from 93, he was a research meteorologist at the Climate Diagnostics Center in Boulder. And then finally, he moved back to Melbourne in 2001, where he spent the last 20 years of his career at the Bureau of Meteorology. But many of you may not know that Harry's final position was with us at Monash University as an adjunct professor, not paid unfortunately, but very prestigious. And so Matt likes to say I was Harry's last boss. And he also has just finalised working on the 2022 ozone assessment, where he led one of the chapters on that, which was released last week. So I guess anyone who's worked closely with Harry knows that his approach to research is really this endless quest for understanding, and it's real passion about the science. And that can be intimidating at first for some particularly junior scientists, but I think through that he really has pushed the barriers of our understanding of climate variability and climate change, and helped climate predictions. And so I've been really privileged to work with Harry on a few new studies, and particularly with Zoe Gillett, who we co-supervised in her PhD, and so he's going to be talking today. And unfortunately for Zoe and for us, it was mainly through the period of COVID, and so that the meetings with Harry and Zoe were really the highlight of my week through those lockdowns. And I think Zoe and I both came away knowing a lot more about atmospheric dynamics at the end of those meetings, but also a lot more about coffee and fish and lots of other things that Harry's passionate about. All right, so we have a really packed schedule of talks today from those who've worked closely with Harry, and those virtual and in person. Over 130 people have registered the event, and then tuning in from all over the world. So just a little bit of housekeeping before we begin. For those in the room, the off chance there's an alarm, Matt Wheeler here is a fire warden and will direct you. Hopefully that won't happen. And for those online, just please make sure you turn off your camera and your microphone, keep that muted. We are recording the event, so yeah, just keep that in mind when you ask questions. And just a final reminder that there are refreshments that will be served immediately after the event out here in the Winter Garden. And there's also drinks at a wine bar from 6 p.m. for anyone's welcome to join us. Okay, All right, so without further ado, we'll get on to our first speaker, who is Harry's PhD advisor, Dennis Hartmann.
I gotta say, I'm worried about this.
Hello, everyone. I'm very grateful for this opportunity to speak at Harry Hendon's retirement celebration. I had the pleasure of being Harry's PhD advisor at the University of Washington. Harry and Brant Liebmann, who will speak next, came to the UW from UCLA at the same time, and they became my second and third PhD students. Each of them had interesting hobbies while they were at the UW. Harry was a surfer when he was in California, and when he came to Washington State, he tried to continue that on the Washington coast, but he soon switched to ski mountaineering, where you would use skins to get to the top of the mountain and then ski down. And then after that, he took up bicycling, which I think he continued in Australia. And Harry had fast twitch muscles, and he was able to win races before he knew enough to shave his legs. I remember him telling me that story. Brant was interesting also. His hobby was train hopping. So he would disappear for a week or so and jump on a freight train and travel someplace and come back with all sorts of stories. When I visited Harry at his boulder home once, we're sitting in the backyard garden, and he had trained his daughter Allison to make an excellent martini, and that's where I developed my taste for martinis. Prior to that, I thought they weren't very good. But I'm getting off topic a little bit. Before I get to Harry's research, let me show you a few pictures that I have of Harry. Okay, normally I would have a lot of photos of Harry as a graduate student, particularly at his PhD party, but I was on sabbatical in 1985, 1986 when Harry finished his PhD. So I don't think he got a PhD party from me. If he did, I cannot find the photos. It doesn't really matter so much because Harry always looked about the same, although I haven't seen him recently. Here's some pictures from 1997 when I visited Harry and Sharon at their home in Melbourne, and Harry cooked up a traditional Aussie barbecue indoors and under a fluorescent light. It was winter. Here we are with my children and Harry and Sharon's friends, Steve and Joe. My wife, Lorraine, took the picture. Here we are, whoops, went a little bit too fast. Here we are at AGU in San Francisco with some accomplished scientists. We're celebrating Harry's induction as a fellow of the AGU, the American Geophysical Union, which is a very great honor. It's very hard to do that. And here's Harry's picture on the wall at the Moscone Center, along with other distinguished scientists from around the world. On another evening at the same AGU meeting, Harry and Sharon joined us for the traditional Hartmann group pub crawl and dinner at the AGU, where for current and past graduate students, where he was a guest of honor as a new fellow and a previous PhD student in my group. Well, let's get down to business then. Harry's first paper was a set of calculations with a linear stationary wave model. Stationary waves were a hot topic then, following the classic Hoskins and Crowley paper in 1981. This was a significant model building exercise, as you can see from the model description on the right-hand side of this page, but the impact of the paper was limited. The linear model did prove its worth, however, as one day Bob Howes came into my office with a question. He had published his 1982 paper showing that organized tropical convection gave a heating profile that was elevated and very different from the traditional first internal mode heating profile, mostly because of the evaporative cooling of the rain falling out of the anvil clouds. Bob asked if I had any ideas why this might be important. I said I did not, but I volunteered Harry to do some linear stationary wave modeling to see how the different heating profiles might affect things. This resulted in the H cubed paper, Hartmann, Hendon, and Howe's 1984, which has gotten a fair number of citations over the year, but is not Harry's most cited paper. I think it's in the top 10 of both Harry and me. On the right here are some plots showing how the top-heavy heating profile affects the Walker circulation over the Pacific Ocean. Harry then shifted to a different model, a dry, two-level, nonlinear model on a sphere. This was forced with an equator-to-pole heating gradient and allowed to develop a general circulation. This model became the tool used in the bulk of his dissertation. Harry's paper produced, here we go. So this model produced a power spectrum of kinetic energy shown on the left here that is pink in mid latitudes, very red in high latitudes, and has a peak around 5 or 10 days in the tropics. The low frequency variability in high latitudes is mostly associated with the quasi-stationary Rossby wave trains moving through their turning latitude, which you can see on the upper panel on the right here. All of the energy is generated by middle latitudes by baroclinic instability, but there's variability at all time scales, including very low ones. This explains why the predictions of regional responses to global warming in middle latitudes is so uncertain, because there's so much unforced low frequency variability in middle latitudes. Despite having no moisture and no land-sea contrast or topography, the model produced a rich spectrum of equatorial waves, primarily as a result of waves generated in mid latitudes propagating into the tropics. The low frequency waves were able to propagate farther into the tropics than the waves associated with the most unstable baroclinic mode. You can see the E vectors on the right-hand side here, associated with total, high, and low frequencies. And on the left are some wave number frequency plots of the power spectral density for the meridional component of the wind, showing the Rossby, Kelvin, and mixed Rossby gravity waves. There should be a line right here through here for the mixed Rossby gravity waves. So Harry's fourth and fifth papers were two additional papers published in 1986 after Harry had left for Melbourne for the first time. And they show the change in the general circulation of this model that are produced by adding a mid-latitude mountain and a stationary equatorial heat source. Well, that is all I have time for, but I think you can see that Harry did a lot of work for his PhD that might have set the stage for the important work he did later, which we're about to hear more about. But thank you, Harry, for coming to the UW for grad school and for remaining a valued friend and colleague all these years since. And thank you all for listening.
Not bad.
That was a pre-recording. As you can see, and we now have another pre-recording from Brant Liebmann, who was a PhD student with Harry at the same time. That's the slide.
Thanks for letting me say a few words about Harry. I've known Harry longer than I have any other meteorologist. We went to UCLA together, to the University of Washington together, and then also worked in Boulder for several years, sometimes in a different group. But the first time I met Harry was at UCLA, when after the first class or so, we had to go to the office to pick up the class notes, and I was fumbling around, didn't have enough money to pay for them, and somebody behind me said, I can loan you the money, and it of course turned out to be Harry. Little did he know that that would be the first of almost countless times that he's helped me out in the past 30 years or so. Harry's helped me with homework problems that I couldn't quite grasp, with concepts that I couldn't quite grasp, and then also with ideas for papers later on. But what truly impresses me about Harry is not that he is one of the top in his profession, which clearly he is, but that almost anything Harry does, he does it at a very high level. For example, sports. When he was in high school, his American football team won the state championship in California. He was the starting tight end. He also won the butterfly swim championship. I assume that was the 400 meters, but I'm not quite sure of that. No, and Harry would probably be the hardest one possible. And then when he was at Washington and in Boulder, he was a great skier, just so graceful coming down the mountain. But he would also go off into the backcountry on weekends with our mutual friend Peter Hess, and they'd climb these impossibly complicated, or not complicated, but steep mountains and then ski off the top of them. So something that was way beyond my ability. And then Harry also took up biking when he he took up biking when he got to Boulder, or when he was in Boulder, and became one of the best riders in the state. He was not the state championship. He was not the state champion, but perhaps it's only because he didn't start bike riding until he was well into his adulthood. But not being satisfied with working a full job and doing these impossibly athletic things on the weekend, Harry and Sharon decided to buy a dilapidated house, and Harry completely tore it down, except for maybe a wall or something, and then rebuilt it. Although I'm not sure it's something that Harry is going to be doing again. I remember one time, for some reason I was by there. Maybe he asked me to come by and hold the flashlight for him or something, because it was in the middle of the night. It was muddy and it was cold, and Harry had to build all these footers because they were pouring concrete tomorrow for the foundation of the house. And Harry says to me, I think my production's really going to go down in the next few years because this is just too much. And it turns out that his production was, even at his low level, was still about twice that of mine. So that's typical of Harry. But and then when Harry finished the house, people would come over and just be amazed. You built this thing yourself? And Harry would just kind of modestly say, well, here, let me take your coat, and if you want, I can give you a tour of the mistakes. And maybe you don't think that's funny, but I just think Harry is one of the funniest people I know, just because of his dry sense of humor and everything. But I got to admit, it probably took me a couple of decades or so to really appreciate his kind of humor. But anyway, after they finished the house, he and Sharon started putting on these phenomenal parties. And Sharon, of course, thinks nothing of whipping up a dinner for 50 people or so. And one of the most memorable, although I can't say I actually remember anything that went on specifically, was that the only requirement for the coming to the party was that you had to bring a bottle of champagne. And maybe, again, that's kind of Harry's sense of humor, but you can imagine that everybody in that house, probably 100 people, all crowded into the kitchen, each with a bottle of champagne that they were chugging down. It was quite the party. It certainly was loud. I almost feel like I'm still deaf from that party, even though I can't remember the specifics, as I say. But the only other thing that I was thinking about was that I've been told that Harry has become quite the fisherman, and I don't know if he remembers, but he and I one time went out to the back behind the office at lunchtime, where Maurice Blackman showed us kind of the basics of fly fishing. So we were out there, swinging around this pole and everything. And of course, Harry had no problem, I was just doing exactly right. And yet I managed to get the hook caught in my lip. And once again, Harry helped me, this time helped me remove it from my lip. So anyway, Harry and Sharon are two of my favorite people in the world, and I hope to see both of you guys soon. Take care.
Well, some of his memory is a little faulty.
Yeah. Anything critical you need corrected on?
We did not have 100 bottles of champagne.
All right, so next up we have Matt Wheeler in person here at the board. So
Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
Well, I'll just start by saying when I think I first met Harry, it would have been in 1993 when I moved to Boulder. I'm not sure the particular instance, but around that time. Yeah, I'll be talking about Harry's top 2 cited papers. Here we go. And yeah, I can advance the slides. Yeah, there you go. Yeah, so this is the Google Scholar page for Harry. So Google has its kind of own algorithms to work these things out, and his top 2 are both.
Matt, sorry to interrupt. Move away from the screen. Yeah, there we go. Perfect.
Okay, his top 2 are both on the Matt and Julian oscillation. The number one was with me, and the other one was Murray Salby, and Murray Salby passed away last year. So it's worthwhile talking about that one as well. Yeah, and of course, you know, everyone, if you saw this, if you had this yourself, you'd be very, very proud of it. Harry, you know, is really a high H index. He as he should, to be proud of that. He you know, the aim is to have your H index exceed your age. And I think Harry is really happy in about 63 when it finally cranked over. But I must say that Chris, his son, Christopher, he's already exceeded it. And he's only in his 30s. So if Christopher is on, good on you, Chris.
Yes.
Okay. All right. So starting with the earlier work, the Hendon and Salby work. So as you heard from Julie, during 1988 to 92, Harry worked in Salby's group at the University of Colorado. So yeah, Harry would have been the kind of the junior relative to Salby in this team. And the top that highly cited paper, the life cycle of the Matt and Julian oscillation, it was actually part of a trilogy. The first in that trilogy was this one here, Salby and Hendon on the interseasonal behavior of clouds, temperature and motion in the tropics. You know, the Harry and Salby, that was number 2. Then there was a third paper, which also included Orlando Garcia. Now that was submitted in 1993. That's when I first arrived in Boulder, and I can remember Salby giving a whole series of seminars on this work at the university. And I read them quite closely at the time. And they did have a really good impression on me, and it also helped my own PhD thesis. So this is from the first paper, and my guess, looking at the figures, is that Harry probably produced these figures. Is that right, Harry? You know, Salby's name was first on this one?
That one on the lower right was actually really difficult.
Okay.
Figure out how to do that shading underneath those curves.
All right. Yeah, with in-car graphics and 48. Because yeah, similar code you were using at the bottom. 20 years later. Yeah. And yeah, I'd say the top right is definitely has been reproduced quite a lot since then. And so what they did is they had back then what was a long record of outgoing long wave radiation from satellite. So long to them was 1979 to 89, and 11 years. Yeah. And so the MJO had already been found in winds and circulation, and they decided to look for it in this OLR data, and they found it. And wave number frequency spectra is shown on the top right here for these eastward propagating wave numbers and wave 30 of 95 days, wave numbers 1 to 3. And they also in that paper emphasized the different propagation speed of the MJO across the globe, being a bit slower in the eastern hemisphere and faster in the western hemisphere. And they also nicely showed the interannual variability of the MJO. That were some kind of new things that they got in that paper. And then Hendon and Salby, which is the more highly cited one, they went on to then show a composite structure of the convection, circulation, and microwave sounding unit temperatures for the MJO. And with that, they show this coupled Kelvin-Rossby wave structure of the Eastern Hemisphere and a radiating Kelvin wave over the Western Hemisphere. And also quite nice was using these temperatures, which are the contours here, and the Olar convection in the shading. They're able to demonstrate how when the MJO is amplifying, you've got a positive relationship between the heating from the convection and where it's warm, implying a production of eddy available potential energy. So it's putting energy into the system, and then when it's decaying over here towards the dateline, it's no longer got this positive relationship between the two, and it's more in quadrature. So it's not getting that energy anymore. All right. And then there was a third paper, but turns out I actually preferred a different paper, Hendon and Salby 96. Yeah, and that one, I think this figure has also been reproduced a lot. It just took those that Olar, the heating from the earlier study, forced it into the Hendon and Hartmann model and produced what looked very much like observed in terms of the Kelvin and Rossby wave structure of the Eastern Hemisphere and the radiating Kelvin wave over the Western Hemisphere. So provided a clean comparison to the obs. All right, so then my work with Harry. So I arrived to the Bureau after being in Boulder for a number of years. I arrived at the Bureau in November 2000 and Harry about 6 months later. And we both done some earlier work on monitoring and prediction of the MJO. And Harry with Fiona Lowe and myself, Klaus Weichmann. So we combined some of the ideas we had in that paper, but we also were influenced by a Maloney and Hartmann paper who used cross-equatorial averages as input to 1D EOFs for monitoring or as an index for the MJO. And I remember, again, my memory is a bit fuzzy, so you can correct me at the end, but Harry supplied the EOFs. I did the calculations of plots, and of course Harry gave lots of opinion, and that helped write through the work. Some of the figures out of that paper on the left of these EOF structures that we use to monitor the MJO, and they're still being used around the globe. The spectra of those EOFs demonstrating that when you include more than one variable, so we use 3 variables, OLR and U850, U200, so winds in the upper and lower troposphere, you were able to discriminate better to the MJO frequencies even when using daily data. Yeah, and we also demonstrated these 1D EOFs could be used in all seasons. A couple of more figures out of that paper. So we gave this phase representation of the MJO, and if you go to the Bureau's web pages, you can see what this looks like in real time. Right now, we're in phase 6 today, and people are kind of tracking the MJO in this phase space now. We also provided examples of how to apply it to your own data or impacts work. And yeah, we also in that paper suggested ways that it could be applied to global forecast models, and it has been got applied for those afterwards. So finally, yeah, this Wheeler and Hendon 04, it's got lots of citations and been applied many times around the globe. And that was actually our first paper together. And I counted up, there have been 28 more. And the ones that I'm most proud of are these 4. You'll hear more about some of them from Dave Thompson and Chidong Zhang. But I think this top left one, I really enjoyed the process of the work that went on in that one, because it was the only other paper after our first that was just us. And it was kind of a real good collaboration in terms of we both were writing code, both sharing code, both writing it, both looking at the equations. And so I was really happy with what the collaboration we did for that. And here's one figure out of that, well, a couple of figures out of that paper. On the left, it's the wave number frequency spectrum, coherent squared spectrum, between OLR and U850, showing convectively coupled Kelvin waves, the MJO, convectively coupled Rossby waves, but also showed this little peak at the 5-day Rossby Boreas mode. So it's interesting that that was in convection as well. And on the right is if you do it between the zonal winds at the two levels. So yeah, so thanks, Harry. That's all. Yeah, Chidong should be online.
Yeah, I was gonna say one thing, Matt. I think when we wrote that Farm M paper, I don't think either of us was thinking we'd written a hit.
Okay.
I don't think, maybe you have a different memory. I thought we were, we've been plugging away, just trying to do this monitoring of the MJO and something that was useful for predictions. I don't think we had any idea that it was.
I didn't think it would.
On its own life.
I didn't think it would exceed Wheeler and Quadrats, which was.
Yeah. But
Yeah, so you're right.
You never know.
Yeah.
Chidong, are you happy for me to share the slides or would you like to?
I think probably it's easier probably for you to
Okay.
to display it. But before that, I want to say no. Wait a minute. Before that, I want to say hi to Sharon. Hi, Sharon. Good to see you.
Excellent. So
It's
next
been a
up.
while. Yeah. So I don't remember when I first met Harry, but I do remember our first collaboration was when I was still, I think, a postdoc at the University of Washington. And at that time, both Harry and I were interested in tropical intraseasonal oscillation, which is now known as the MJO. But at that time, there is some kind of nonsense going on saying that the intraseasonal oscillation can be stationary, not propagating. And Harry and I thought that we have to stop that nonsense, so we decided to write a paper together. So that's our first collaboration. And since then on, and we worked together many times. And up to date, I'm still working with Harry with his, I think it's his former postdoc, Uphick Centra. We're still working on MJO stuff right now. So Matt asked me to talk about Harry's contribution to the study of MJO-ENSO interaction. And I'm glad to do so. And it's an honor and a privilege for me to join you to celebrate the phenomenal career of Harry. Harry has done a lot of work related to MJO and to ENSO separately. And the MJO-ENSO is only a very small part of his work, but I think it's a pretty fun part. And so I'll take this opportunity to lead you through some of his work on this subject. Next one, please. So this is the paper that Harry published in which both MJO and ENSO are discussed in all different kind of ways. So there's impossible for me to go through all this work. So I'm just give you some highlights that I think I enjoy the most. Next slide, please. So the notion that the MJO and ENSO are connected comes from many casual observations. This is one of them, and this actually comes from one of the slides from Harry's talk several years ago in Bureau. You can see that the logo, the Bureau logo there. So I stole these slides, and what this shows is if you look at the upper left figures and you see that big red, and that is the positive anomaly of SST that symbolize the mature phase of ENSO. And you look to the left, that is a surface wind at about the same time. You can see those thin stripes represent the eastward propagating MJO. And if you look at the left bottom figure, you see there's one big stripe coming from your left to your right. That's is the signal of oceanic cavern waves, and all this tied together and give people an idea that maybe the MJO can force the ocean cavern waves, and ocean cavern wave is a major mechanism for ENSO development, so may influence ENSO. And this type of causal relationship you can find in many major ENSO events. So this start whole notion that maybe MJO has something to do with ENSO. Next one, please. However, there's a lot of mystery and a lot of controversies related to this. And number one is you can see a lot of MJO activities during ENSO year, especially during ENSO develop year. But there are many MJO going on when there's no ENSO. And if you want to calculate the correlation between the MJO activity and the SST in the Pacific, the correlation is very, very weak. So there's no one-to-one correspondence between the two. So how can you argue that MJO and ENSO are related? So this is mystery number one. And Harry addressed this in the following way. Next one, please. So it turns out what happened in spring, in the ENSO develop year, in the spring, May, for example, at that time, when you have a very strong MJO activity, and that will lead to a strong ENSO, El Nino event later in January of the following year. So there's no simultaneous correlation, but there's a very strong time lag correlation. So that addressed one of the mysteries why there's no simultaneous correlation between the two. Next one, please. And another mystery of the MJO-ENSO interaction is obvious. There's a skill separation, right? So the ocean cavern waves, the period is 70 days, and the MJO period, peak period is about 40 to 50 days. So there is a mismatch between them in terms of their periods. So how you argue that MJO can force ocean carbon waves? Next one, please. So Harry addressed this in a very clever way, and to make this short, simply speaking, the MJO spectrum is very, very broad, and there's a low frequency part of it, and because the MJO and the ocean carbon wave both propagate eastward, even at a different speed. So for very large zonal scale oceanic carbon waves, you can imagine that the MJO just passing by that patch of ocean carbon waves, and the ocean carbon waves continue feel the MJO forcing through a longer period of time. So in that case, for large carbon wave, ocean carbon wave, for example, that in this figure, the solid line is a 7,000 kilometer wavelength carbon waves. There is a resonance forcing. This is simply because the MJO just right on the carbon wave both propagate eastward. If the carbon wave zonal scale is too small, for example, 2,000 kilometers, the MJO will passing by that carbon wave very fast. So the carbon wave will feel the MJO forcing in a very shorter period of time. So Harry explained this very well, why the two phenomenon can ride on each other and generate a resonance forcing. So that problem is solved. Next one, please. The third mystery is the ENSO has been traditional think as a result of a couple dynamics, the ocean and atmosphere coupled together, and there's different theory in that thinking. And MJO is not known as a very strong coupled waves. So how does MJO come in competition with this coupled dynamics? So this is another paper that Harry and others write and demonstrate that as a matter of fact, both these coupled dynamics and MJO forcing contribute to ENSO variability. So you can see this figure. If you focus on, so this figure basically use only two factors. One represents the coupled dynamics, one represents MJO, to linearly regress on ENSO SST to see how much these two factors can reproduce SST variability, which is the red line, red curve. So the green curve is the coupled only coupled dynamics, and the blue curves represent only the MJO forcing. And you can see for some of the ENSO events, they contribute about the same, and in some of the events, the MJO contribution even greater than the coupled dynamics. So, and this is fitting to other argument saying that the MJO ENSO can be forced by stochastic forcing and can be forced by westerly wind burst, and it does not need MJO. And Harry addressed this problem in the next study. And Harry basically find, next slide, please, that if you take all the uncoupled dynamics together and calculate their variance, and the majority of them, up to 70%, actually represented by the MJO. So all those talking about stochastic forcing, westerly wind burst, that's okay, but it is the MJO that plays the game. Next one, please. The last mystery I want to say is, okay, you have said the MJO and ENSO are related, but in many coupled ENSO forecast model, there's no MJO. So does that matter? Well, Harry's study said, yes, it does matter. You see next one. So Harry had showed that in springtime, if you have more MJO activity, more number of MJO events, that actually will lead to stronger El Nino later. So it's not the strength individual MJO events, but it's the number of MJO that really matters at the initial time of your ENSO forecast. Plus, next one. And if at your initial conditions, if the MJO events later on propagate further east, for example, past the dateline, that will lead to stronger ENSO event. And then if you initialize your model with MJO events that does not propagate across the dateline, for example. So that demonstrate that at the initial time, your MJO signal in your initial condition really matter to what kind of ENSO you will have in your later prediction. Next one. So all put them together, I think we have a pretty good understanding of how MJO and ENSO is related. The easy part is how ENSO modulate MJO, that's just through SST, and SST change the large scale condition for atmospheric convection, which MJO depends on. The hard part is how MJO influence El Nino. And as I said, through the forcing of Kelvin waves, and Kelvin waves force equatorial thermocline. But at the same time, ENSO also affected by coupled dynamics, and MJO also affected by many other uncoupled dynamics, such as initiation over the Indian Ocean, the maritime continent barrier effect, moisture, and so on and so forth. So there's a lot of chaotic stochastic process. That's why to tease out the connection between MJO and ENSO is not that easy, but Harry did a lot of that. So this ends my talk, and I want to say a last word. As you have heard, Harry is very competitive in sport. He rides bike, I ride bike. I just no way for me to follow him, so I give up. And his science is much better, and his citation is way above me. So I don't want to compete with Matt. There's only one thing I can compete with Harry. We are both fans of exotic food. And I beat him at one time. That is one food, I won't tell you what it is. He won't eat, and I enjoy that. And another time, we both had live octopus, which is a delicacy at Busan, South Korea. And he had a very interesting experience of that, Harry, if you remember. And I will leave to him to tell you that story. Thank you for listening. By the way, this is the evening in my time, so I have my wine with me, and I'm going to drink with to Harry, and hope it won't be too long before I can drink with Harry and Sharon in person to celebrate Harry's retirement, either when you two are visiting US, or maybe I have a chance to visit Melbourne. But this is for Harry.
Well, I can just tell you, we were eating the live. I don't remember being octopus. I thought it was squid. But it doesn't matter. The tentacles stuck to the roof of my mouth. I had to stick a chopstick inside my mouth and fry the octopus.
Yeah, I thought you won't forget that.
Fantastic.
Thanks, Chidong. I would really appreciate you being online and reminiscing about the MJO and ENSO work.
Yeah, it's right.
Yeah, my pleasure.
Great. Thanks, Chidong, for tuning in. So next up, we have Raghu from the University of Maryland. You there, Raghu?
Yeah, hi.
Take it away.
Are you ready? Yeah, you can project my slide. I only have 3. So I said, yes, I will attend this meeting online when Matt sent an email. Then I realized maybe Harry doesn't even remember who I am. Do you remember me, Harry? I don't have it.
Raghu, I suggested that Matt contact you.
Okay. I hope I don't owe you any money. Anyway, I don't have any papers with Harry, but I met Harry for the first time, I think in 2004, maybe at IITM in Pune. And we went out for eating dinner with Annamalai and so on. And Annamalai had us eat this betel leaf with some stuff inside. And Harry spat it out and said, "This tastes like deodorant." That's my first interaction with Harry. But I got influenced by this paper a lot. I have cited this, my students, my postdocs, who have cited this like 3 dozen times. This is cited overall maybe more than 500 times. If you go to the next slide, I have built a lot of stories on this very nice correlation map. Basically, it's showing the relation between Indonesian rainfall with the reverse sign with SSTs for MAM, JJ, SON, and DJF. And I was always stuck by this from the beginning that this is probably something that is very critical for the Indian Ocean dipole to begin with. And one of the first meetings I attended right after my PhD was, I think, in Japan. And that time IOD was being sold very aggressively, and anybody who didn't agree with IOD were getting hit on the head with a sledgehammer. And Harry was brave enough to tell Yamagata that he doesn't believe in this is a dipole at all, but he couldn't fight the crowd, so he was just going to go with the crowd. So he made this statement in a meeting. I was very impressed because I was very scared. I'm still very scared of Yamagata, in fact. But anyway, so we used this to develop several studies. One of the good ones is to look at the Kelvin waves that are generated by MJOs in the Indian Ocean that hit the eastern coast, go down the coast off of Java and Sumatra and interact with the Indonesian through flow. And they create a barocclinic instability, and the waves go back actually to the southwestern tropical Indian Ocean where the MJO genesis happens. And we showed that the heat budget over there is modified by this interaction between the MJO and the Indonesian through flow, and it potentially has, it actually has quite a big impact on the next layer heat budget. So there may be feedback to the MJO genesis, but we have to do some modeling experiments to confirm that, and whether it's a positive feedback or a negative feedback, and if it's a positive feedback, what would break that chain and so on. The other study that came out that is directly related to this paper is the MJO detour, which Chidong was criticizing heavily, but finally accepted the paper. The interactions of the Indonesian through flow again in the region of South China Sea, Java Sea creates conditions where air-sea interactions can actually drive the MJO detours as opposed to the Daehyun Kim's ideas, which relies much more on atmospheric processes, meridional gradients of humidity and Australian rainfall and so on. So I think Harry's paper is very critical again to look at the role of these interactions he has outlined in this paper in terms of what role the Indonesian through flow and the MJO interactions play on detouring the MJOs, because then once they are detoured, they have a big impact on the South Pacific convergence zone as well, and that has some important responses to the global warming, which may end up mattering for Australian rainfall as well. So many such studies. All my students and postdocs, I always tell them to read this paper, because I think this kind of summarizes the real interaction between the Indian Ocean and the Pacific Ocean, and trying to develop some ideas on how Indonesian rainfall and generally what Ramage called the boiler box is what generates a lot of the perturbations. And I think El Nino, IOD, and the Atlantic Nino are basically Eastern Ocean responses to this perturbation. So all those ideas I got out of Harry's paper, this one. So if you go to the next picture, I don't know if Harry remembers where this is from. I had another picture where I look very old, so I'm not using that one. Harry, do you
Raghu, that's at the top of the hill in Pune.
Yeah, so this is, I gave, at some point I suggested to Rajivan, who was the Secretary of Ministry of Earth Science at the time, that we have to have some non-Indians, outside experts on the Research Advisory Council. So I'd given Harry's name and Matt Collins's name, and Harry always loves to travel, so he agreed. Are you out of it now? You are not on this panel anymore, I think. So it was always fun to meet him in India and again have dinners. The other dinner I had with Harry, I don't know if he remembers, he came to NOAA, I think, for some meeting. I took him out to dinner in DC, and the waiter thought we were a couple because it turned out that that was Valentine's Day dinner. So that's that was kind of hilarious. So Harry, I hope you get a chance to come to India again, or we meet somewhere, because I know you worked in Australia and you don't have a lot of money. I'm in India now, I don't have a lot of money. So I don't know who will fund our travel, but we have to find a way to meet. I see Duane is up next. If he's online, maybe he has a lot of money. Maybe he can bring us to JPL or something. So, but happy retirement, Harry. Great to see you again.
Thanks, Raghu. Yeah, I forgot about that Valentine's Day meal. We ended up with a rose and a box of chocolates.
All right, so we have one more talk in this session from Duane Waliser, but unfortunately Duane couldn't be here to do it, but he has sent Matt some slides that we'll share now. Just for all the people online, at the end of this, we're going to have a 5-minute break, but we would like to take a photo of you, all the online participants. So hang around and we'll just quickly get you to turn your cameras on. And then, yeah, before we have a break. All right, thanks, Matt.
Okay, this is from Duane Waliser. I'll just read it out. Dear Harry, we got to go to a lot of meetings together over the MJO and related topics. The ISI, actually, I don't know ISI. What's that?
I think that was maybe.
Okay.
ISO, maybe.
ISO, yeah, maybe. S2S, that's subseasonal to seasonal. ENSO, we should know that. YOTC, that's Europe tropical convection. Flavours, we've heard about that already. You were always a delight to work with in these settings, always happy to pitch in, make participants feel included, mentor early career scientists and provide guidance to the whole team through your analyses, presentations, questions and recommendations. And here's a couple of those meetings. The bottom left is Singapore. I remember that one. The top right is South Korea. In Busan, South Korea, and the top right one that was quite memorable because it was Harry, Duane, myself, and Ken Sperber who organised that meeting, and was the bringing together of the MJO through the MJO task force and the Asian Australian Monsoon panel communities, yeah, it was Ken and Harry who were the co-chairs of the Monsoon panel, and it was Duane and I who were chairs of the MJO task force.
Oh, so before you go, just so you know, so in that lower left one, Chidong and you were standing there in the back. And if people didn't know Duane, he's just to the right of the edge of the red circle.
In the brown,
Yeah.
brown shirt.
And the little guy in the front is Raghu.
And
Nice.
the right hand image, I'm wearing the hat in the back. If you go one person in the back row over, that's Eric Maloney, then the next one over is kind of like Duane Waliser. So yeah, so this is Duane talking now. To my good fortune, I got to work with you over the years in settings that led to a number of papers. You were an ideal contributor, whether you were leading the paper or one of the co-authors. And here are some of the ones he highlighted. Yeah, this one on the top left, that's coming out of that meeting that was in Korea. I think that's it. Is that it? No, more photos. And with all those meetings came a lot of fun meals together. And
Oh, that is the one.
yeah, Duane is in the top left there. He's kind of 3 along from the on the right. Yeah, Raghu's in the bottom right down there. Duane is in the bottom left figure. Duane is sitting in the back left corner next to Mitch Moncrief. And who is that?
I think Gabe Becky.
Oh yeah, Gabe Becky and Harry. Yeah. Adam Sobel. One of the Korean ladies. Hami Kim.
Maybe Timmy and Dayu.
Diane Kim, Eric Maloney, Chidong looks like he's there. I think that was the octopus dinner. That was the octopus dinner. Yeah.
I don't think it was. The other because the other famous thing about the octopus dinner, I think it was you.
Yeah.
They served all the sashimi on a bed of grated daikon, but it turned out it wasn't meant for consumption. And you, being the frugal guy that you were, decided to eat the decoration, and the waiter ran over and literally pulled it out of your mouth. So look at that.
Okay, thanks.
Thanks everyone for the talk. So we're going to have a quick break, 4 minutes, cut 1 minute off it. And so everyone here in the room can get up and stretch.
There's toilets out in
Toilet
there,
back.
and we'll hold the doors open for you.
And so everyone online, if you could put your camera on, and we'll take a photo just to record. Excellent.
Can you have the gallery mode? So put the people filling the screen.
Okay, so is everyone who wants to turn it on, has turned it on? It's Dave, yep, excellent.
We've got a large gallery on it.
Thank you. See you,
All right,
Harry.
I think we've taken a photo. We'll take one more, maybe, take one. Excellent, all right. Thanks,
Yeah.
everyone, appreciate it.
Hi, Julie.
So we'll come back in about 3 more minutes.
No worries. Thank you.
And David and Matt, thanks for your emails. I'll pass them on to Harry.
No worries, that's great. Thanks, Julie. Catch up soon. See ya. Like Dave Thompson, by the way.
Let's get the next one ready. So who's the next person?
We'll talk sometime soon. See ya.
Yeah, but I realized that the way I was taking pictures. It doesn't matter. I'm keeping my pictures. So no pictures. It's fine. More stressful than giving a presentation. It's absolutely simple, except for when I'm trying to share the window. I went down and looked at it. You know, you spent windows to get things, but then I don't even know that. I just like, well, I mean, it's all.
How are you? I heard Jim borrowed my incumbent a little bit.
Hey, Matt, say bye to Harry for me. I have to run.
Yeah, Jim, I think you said it was and stuff.
So we haven't got a benefit where it wasn't just you guys.
All right, everyone should.
That's all Dave Thompson.
Yeah, I do softwares personally.
You have my cameras on.
Fun. All right. So we're coming into the next section now, which is got a bit of a more extratropical and stratospheric focus. So the first up to speak to us is Seok-Woo Son, who's dialing in from the Seoul National University in Korea. So go ahead, Seok-Woo.
So can you hear me?
Yes. Yes.
So this is the last slide. Can you move back to my first slide?
Yeah.
So Julie, it's too bad. I can see soccer
Sorry.
there.
Yeah.
It's thinking if everybody else can.
I
Is that-
just asked and they said they can't do it.
Can't do it.
People online can see him, but it's just.
Yeah,
Audience here can't see you.
Yeah.
we are sorry, Harry.
Sockwu, I can see you.
Yep.
Technology is deficient.
So it's my honor to give a short presentation in the Harry's Retirement Symposium. So as you may know, Harry was interested in and good at many different subjects. Because of limited time, I just cover his contribution to SPARC and SPARC sciences. I assume most people in this meeting are familiar with SPARC, but just in case, SPARC stands for Stratosphere Troposphere Processes and their role in climate. This is one of the core projects of WCRP. Next slide, please. I assume not many people, maybe except in Australia, may know Harry was SPARC SS member from 2017 to 2022. I mean, this is 6-year-long commitment. So on the right-hand side, I believe this is Harry's first SS meeting in Incheon, 2017. You can find him on the top left corner. The bottom one shows another group photo in the 2019 SPARC SS meeting. Number 18, this is Harry. So around this time, SPARC tried to expand its research scope to the troposphere, including tropical meteorology. And Harry was the best scientist in the field. And he made significant contribution to the SPARC and SPARC sciences. One of the good examples is SPARC General Assembly in 2018. Next slide, please. So right before this meeting, we got typhoon hitting Osaka area just a day before General Assembly. But as a co-chair of Scientific Organizing Committee, the Harry successfully led this meeting. And you can see Harry is smiling with few early Korean scientists who just received presentation awards. On the right-hand side, I'm showing you the opening ceremony. In the bottom one, you can find Harry in the middle. This is, I assume, this is the group photo in the first day. Another very important contribution of Harry is ozone assessment report. Next slide, please. It's hard to imagine Harry is working on stratospheric ozone, but he made very significant contribution to this research area. As a matter of fact, he led chapter 5 of this assessment report. Chapter 5 covers stratospheric ozone changes and their impacts in climate variability and long-term change. This is not that simple report. This is comparable to the IPCC report. This is long-term commitment, and there are lots of people joining this report. It successfully organized this assessment and published the report last year. Next slide, please. This is one of the key figures, to me, one of the key figures of the report. It shows the Australian heat wave in 2002. You can see that maximum subject temperature in the top left corner, and bottom one shows the precipitation anomaly. So temperature was really high and precipitation was really low. But unfortunately, the Australian operational model failed to predict this event. And then in the middle, it shows the operational access prediction in this month. The model was successful in the Eastern Australia, but if you look at the Western Australia, model actually didn't predict hot and dry condition. On the right-hand side, Harry showed the difference between model experiment with observed stratospheric ozone versus climatological ozone. So far, all the Met Office models, the CLOS 5 and CLOS 6, they use climatological ozone as a default. So in this experiment, Harry shows that observed ozone can impact tropospheric condition. So if you look at the Western Australia, now model bias is substantially improved. It looks relatively simple, but as far as I know, this is the first paper that shows the importance of stratospheric ozone on the sub-seasonal to seasonal prediction. Before this paper, people usually assume a stratospheric ozone is just about Montreal Protocol, long-term climate change, and so on. But he shows that it's not just about long-term climate change. It could be very important in the operational prediction. Next slide, please. This work was extended later using CLOS 5 long-term reforecast. This one shows southern annular mode, a correlation coefficient of southern annular mode in September and to October for the period of 2004 to 2010. The left-hand side is just conventional CLOS 5 model experiment. This is comparable to the access, as you know. So the reddish color shows reasonably good precision scale. So you can see a very high correlation coefficient in the stratosphere, above 100 hectopascal. When the troposphere, prediction scale is not that high. So maybe within just 3 weeks, correlation coefficient decreased to negative something. Then somewhat interestingly, this precision scale re-emerged in October. So this re-emergence of prediction scale in the troposphere is mostly due to the stratosphere. So up to this point, it's still interesting. The stratosphere can affect a troposphere on sub-seasonal to seasonal timescale. But on right-hand side, we did exactly the same experiment, but instead of climatological ozone, we used observed ozone. So ozone hole changes every year. So we used time-varying ozone profile in the right-hand side. So if you make the comparison between these two, they look very similar. In the stratosphere, climatological ozone versus observed ozone, it doesn't make a big difference. But if you look at troposphere, there is significant difference. Now, the correlation decreased much slowly, and scale re-emergence in October is much stronger. In C, I'm showing you the difference between anomaly correlation coefficient between those two experiments at 700 hectopascal. Now you can find that time-varying ozone can improve tropospheric tropospheric prediction scale in October significantly. And this could be really useful for the operation subsequent to CM prediction. Right-hand side, please. Another very interesting and important contribution of Harry is possible impact of stratospheric quasi-biennial oscillation on the Madden-Julian oscillation. This figure shows the MJO temporal evolution during easterly phase of QBO on the left-hand side and westerly phase of QBO on the right-hand side. So y-axis, that's the time, x-axis, that's the longitude. So you can see that during easterly phase of QBO, MJO is better organized than westerly phase of QBO. When I found this on, to be honest with you, I was not really confident because I have no idea about Madden-Julian oscillation. But Harry told me, why not? He said, it's possible. So that's how this paper was published in Journal of Climate. The next slide, please. He extended this analysis to the operational model, and also he tried to identify the possible mechanism of QBO-MJO connection. If you look at the bottom panel, I mean, this one shows the possible impact of QBO on MJO prediction scale. And MJO is one of the most important prediction sources in the middle latitude. But he showed that with NGO, he showed that during easterly phase of QBO, MJO is better predicted than westerly phase of QBO. This is another big contribution. Again, many people will assume stratosphere is just scientific issue, but he shows that it's very important even in the operational prediction. Can you go back to the previous slide? Yeah. On the top panel, he shows that the QBO-MJO connection might be modulated by Kelvin wave response to the MJO convection. So on the left-hand side, the Kelvin wave signal is stronger during easterly phase of QBO. So this is one of the leading hypotheses of QBO-MJO connection so far. The next slide, please. So all of these works are very highlighted in the recent review paper published at Nature Review Earth and Environment. So Chidong was one of the co-authors in this paper. Last slide, please. So I couldn't cover all the details of his work, but I should say that I should thank you, Harry, for his contribution to SPARC and SPARC Sciences on behalf of SPARC SSC. Raghu, in the previous session, Raghu said he doesn't have lots of funding, but I do have. So I strongly encourage Harry and Sharon to visit Korea once again to continue his legacy. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much, Sophie. All right, so next we have Dave Thompson from Colorado State University. He's online as well, live. Hey, Dave.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yep, go ahead.
Can you see me, Harry, down there in the corner?
I can see you, Dave. Where are you? Are you in the UK?
I'm in Colorado. It's 9 o'clock at night. I told my my kids, like, I just need the room for half an hour. My son just came in to grab his pajamas. I'm like, really? Can you? So if I'm not on my A game, that's why. So am I going to see my slides? Oh, I see. I push on Deborah Hudson's thing and I can see my slides. Is that how that works? And I just say move forward. Is that okay?
Yeah, we can see.
Okay. Anyway, Harry, my so there's. I didn't really know what to say, to be honest. And I'm thankful to have this. The next, you gave me 30 minutes. Was that right? To talk about my experience with Harry. And so then I as these things happen, when I started thinking about what to talk about, I started geeking out and I went into all these old emails and all these exchanges Harry and I had when we first met. And through the course of the first paper that we wrote together. So what I thought I'd do is I'm just going to show a dialogue between Harry and I over this time. And I was very careful with the emails. They're all nice. And I felt a little funny doing it, but I think it's okay. Because I think you can really hear Harry's voice. So I'm going to step through a dialogue that we had over the course of writing this paper. And the point is just to try to provide a sense of my experience working with Harry over this time and how great it was and kind of how funny it was too at the same time. So do I say next slide or do I push a button on my screen?
If you tell me next slide, thanks.
You'd think after 3 years of the pandemic, I'd have this mastered, but I don't. So here's the first email. I first met Harry in the summer of 2003, when it's the first time I really met him, and it was at a meeting in Sapporo. And then Harry said, oh, you should come visit Australia. And so I got an email from him shortly after that meeting, mentioning that he'd already been thinking about this paper. And the point of this paper was, at the time, no one had looked at the relationship between the southern annular mode and Australian rainfall, and just laying out what's going on. But Harry had been thinking about this in 2003 and said, you should come visit and we can work on this. And I guess Neville was keen that I come. So anyway, I'm like, yeah, that'd be great. And then about 5 months later or so, I get another email from Harry say, okay, I'll see you at the airport on Sunday. So I visited Melbourne in January 2004. It was my first time down there. It was a great visit. It was a great chance to visit the community there. And I wish I was there right now, but I'm not. Just because it's 3 o'clock in the afternoon and it's sunny and it's probably warm, and here it's not. This is when I really got to know Harry, and it was the catalyst for our first paper together. And so what the next slide will show, what it should show is a picture, but it doesn't, because I couldn't find the picture. I looked for like an hour, and eventually I was like, I have a job to do. I can't stop looking at this picture. But I had this great picture of me and Harry and Christopher, his son. They just moved from Boulder, eating fish and chips on the beach. And it was the sunset, beers in hand. We were younger, for sure. And there were smiles all around. And to me, that picture just sort of epitomized that time and that visit. Because again, it was not only great to start working scientifically with Harry and then with Matt and others in the Bureau, but just on a personal level, it was just great to get to know Harry. And since then, I've appreciated that. So anyway, that's a synopsis of that. That should be a picture of our visit. So next slide, I get home from the trip, and then Harry sends me this email. And I don't know, this nickname Thomo, I don't know what this is. And then it has as an aside about some famous bowler, Jeff Thompson, fast bowler who's really fast, but sometimes wild. So it's an aside. And then the email says, oh, and by the way, I redid the correlations of the same zonal SST. So the analysis, Harry was plugging away at the analysis, and I'm just glad this nickname didn't stick. So that's the first and the last time I heard it, until I ran these slides by Matt, and he threw it back at me in an email last night. So next slide, please. So this is just a month later, and I got some original analyses from Harry, and I asked him, is there any chance, it didn't look quite right, and I asked if the index was inverted, and Harry's response was this about when he was in grad school? That's the first thing Holton ever asked him. You sure you don't have a Fortran error? And I thought this was funny because I also had Holton on my committee in UW. And this is just a really polite way of a committee member or an advisor basically saying what you've done is wrong, right? So it doesn't make sense. I don't know if it was wrong, but it's just funny. Okay, so months pass. In the next slide. So this is coming up on that summer, and then Harry's mentioning that I let this thing sit. I didn't give it enough attention, and Harry's like, no, we got to keep working on this. The SAM impact on rainfall won't go away. People in Australia are interested about it. We should keep going on. We should do a publication. He says later, about a month later, hey, I'll take a stab at the writing. And then there was a hiccup, I guess. Things slowed down because they moved buildings, and I thought this was kind of funny. I remember that first office. That was before Harry shared with Matt down there. So I thought it was pretty funny. Maybe that's not. But Harry, after saying his office wasn't working out so great, he says, hey, now I'm back to work. So again, this is Harry's tenacity. He keeps working on the paper. Next slide, please. So now we're jumping forward, like 6 months or so. And then I'm like, hey, maybe we should look at New Zealand, basically, is my email. Any chance you have precipitation data for the New Zealand region? And Harry's like, I contacted them, but they said we could buy their data. And I was like, what? You have to like buy scientific data. And the point, I guess I'm just making a little like political point here, is that the data was really pricey. I think it was more than the page charges. And so that's why the paper focused on Australia. And anyway, that's just my little about how important it is for, this is like the sausage, right? The making of the sausage, but it's obviously it's important that data be freely available. I'll just say that. Okay, next slide, please. That's late 2004. Now we're going 6 months into the future. Lots of emails, like hundreds between then about this paper. I keep all my email exchanges on papers, so be careful when you send stuff to me. But anyway, and then I was just like, hey, how's that building working out? That could have been great, but all this. All right, that's summer 2005. So the next slide, please. Let's see where we are now. Oh, almost 6 months later. So now this is January 2006. And Harry says, hey, I'll get back onto this. We're still working at it. It's 2 years since my visit, 2.5 since we first decided to work on this paper, and Harry suggested it. And then the second part of the email is that Christopher just started year 12. He'll finish in December, and hopefully he'll do all right. And so paper's now 2 years old. Harry's still pushing us to keep at it. And just an aside, Christopher is he full or so? He just got tenure, right, in the U.S. I think. Is that right, Harry?
Yeah, tenure.
Tenure. The point is, he did all right. He did. No need to worry.
I thought the point was we published the paper.
This is still going. Keep going. Next slide. What can you? Okay, so now like a year later, this is June 2007. The paper was accepted in late 2006, published 2007, nearly 4 years after the analysis. And the sort of one point here is that really without Harry's enthusiasm, determination, this wouldn't have happened, right? It just kept going, and it turned out to be a great paper. I love it. So the next slide, please. And so now you shoot forward to now, and I'm not a citation kind of person, whatever, but I do. In this case, this paper did well, and it had an impact, and really the impact it had it's just entirely due to Harry's insight, his tenacity, and really is the sense of this is what the community needs to know. We need to keep pushing this, and it took a while, and it went a lot of back and forth, and a few office changes here and there, and all that, but it still kept pushing. And the paper has had and still has an impact, and it's entirely due to Harry. So the next slide, please. I've only got a couple more. I'm losing track of my time. And so this is my favorite figure from this. Matt Wheeler made the figure for the paper. But again, this is from Harry's paper. It just shows the rainfall difference between positive and negative. Sam, it's a beautiful figure because you can see the winds, you can see the change in precipitation. It's just clean, it's simple, don't need a caption. And it's really in Harry's style. So this is really one of my favorite figures from one of my favorite papers with genuinely one of my favorite scientists. So the next slide. And so that's it. That's all I wanted to say. I just wanted, I think I could like hear Harry's voice when I was reading all those emails. And it made me kind of amazed at how time goes on and Harry's retiring, but I'll still absolutely keep in touch, and I look forward to doing that. So thanks. I'm really lucky to have had the chance to develop this paper with you, but more importantly, I just feel really lucky to have gotten to know you. So I haven't been down under, I haven't been to Australia since before the pandemic, and I'm gonna make a point of doing that soon. And one of the first things I'm gonna do is I'm gonna come to Melbourne, and I'm gonna find that picture of us on the beach, and I'm gonna go back to the beach, and we're gonna have a couple beers and have some fish and chips, and I'll get to say thanks in person. Thanks for listening.
Thanks, Dave. And I think your impact here at the Bureau is a lot greater than you may know about. I mean, it's the follow-on papers from that, Eun-Pa really taken the lead on them, and it's carried over into the quality of our seasonal prediction systems. That's one point. So yeah, so it's been great that we've been able to collaborate with you. The other point was, I couldn't have underestimated the role that Matt played in that paper, that SAM paper. It really wouldn't have happened without Matt. So
yeah. I know that, but it's gonna be a while until Matt retires, and so I'll have to drag this paper back up then, and then I'll give Matt all the accolades. But I did feel kind of guilty because I know it was a 3-person effort. But I just wanted to give the love to you, Harry.
And the final point was that it took 4 or 5 years for that paper to come out was the rule. That was not the exception. I was sort of famous for going off in too many directions and not getting to the point, but anyway,
It was worth the wait.
yeah.
All right, so we better move on. Thanks, Dave, very much again. Next we have Eun-Pa Lim here at the Bureau of Meteorology and one of Harry's favorite collaborators.
He's #1 collaborator.
More than you?
Yeah. More
Oh.
papers with Eun-Pa than me.
Wow.
In terms of the quantity.
And
Yeah. This is my version 5 presentation. Okay, yeah. So I'm Eun-Pa from the Bureau of Meteorology. I have been working here in research since mid-2006 when I was redeemed by Harry after being dumped by Bertrand. Big boss in research. In my presentation, I'd like to show you some key SEM-related studies led by Harry or significantly contributed by him. The SEM is intrinsically one of the atmosphere's internally driven processes. Therefore, it had been thought to be only predictable only about 2 weeks in advance. But in this paper, we demonstrated that the seasonally average SEM could be skillfully predicted by our Bureau's first dynamic seasonal forecast system FOEMA more than 3 months in advance for spring and summer seasons, and to a less degree for autumn and early winter season. And we attributed that skill to the SEM's relationship with differently flavored ENSO in this paper. Then Harry led this case study of the wettest spring on record over Eastern Australia in 2010. This super excessive rainfall occurred in the midst of drought-breaking strong La Nina and accompanying strong negative IOD. But in this paper, we noted that the positive SEM was extraordinarily strong and persistent throughout the season, mainly because of its relationship with La Nina. And also we found that the SEM tended to significantly amplify the Australian spring rainfall response to ENSO over the previous 50 years, which really highlighted the SEM to be another very important driver of Australian spring rainfall anomalies. In this paper, Harry really tried to get a deep dynamical understanding of the mechanism of the mechanism of the SEM to promote the Southern Hemisphere subtropical rainfall. Here, we show that the SEM's interaction with the forward edge of the heavenly circulation modulates the rainfall in the subtropics in our summer season, but this interaction is absent in winter because of the winter's double jet structure and resultant changes in eddy mean flow feedback. As the people who worked with Harry would know, Harry is, give me a second. Harry is a perfectionist with his research, and I think that character really peaked around 2013 when we were working in this paper. He kept throwing at me questions like, have you checked this index? Have you looked at this rainfall data set? What about looking at 600 hectopascal instead of 500 hectopascal? Can you put the white color in the middle between red and blue in this plot? And so on. And at the end, I ended up producing 2,310 figures for this paper.
You gotta learn to say math.
And more recent study led by Harry is this one, but I won't go into the details about this paper because Seok-Woo already talked about it. But
I'd like to just point it out that Harry really led this study with his Fortran 77 programming and plotting skill. And he looked really pumped every time he showed me his plots, the line plots. And that was also mentioned. The other one I just modified this morning was our 2019 stratospheric warming event. At the beginning, we were in disbelief of it happening because in the over Antarctica, such dramatic southern stratospheric warming is very rare. So we were quite puzzled by our forecast for predicting this really extraordinary warming event. But Harry really brought the world-leading experts together to properly understand the evolution of that event, and also to inform the scientific community and the Australian public about the potential dangerous impact of the stratospheric warming event at reasonably long lead time with good confidence. So in wrapping up, Harry's research has been really impactful, insightful, and innovative. And his way of doing research was really always meticulous. Besides, as other speakers pointed out, he's such a witty, funny, and fun person who is also very open and adventurous to different cultures, food, and liquor. So as you can imagine, it was an absolute privilege and honor to work with and learn from him for 14 years nonstop. Since Harry's retirement, I've realized that science was much more fun when it was done with Harry. And many of my colleagues indeed agreed with me. As a last note, I didn't know how much Harry loves fishing. If I knew it, I wouldn't have been so offended when he said my results were fishy. Harry, if you ever get bored with your fishing and want to do some climate research, I will always be more than happy to produce plots for you. Although I can't promise to make as many plots as 2,310, but I'll try my best. Finally, I thank you so much from the very bottom of my heart for being such a great and gracious mentor for our research, and also a great role model for life. Thank you.
Eun-Pa's left Harry speechless. I think some of the most enjoyable scientific discussions I've had is when Eun-Pa and Harry are really fighting with each other.
I do like that word fishy though.
Yeah, to get to the great scientific outcomes that they have. So. Okay, so next up we have Zoe Gillett, who was a PhD student with Harry and I, and your only PhD student was her, or maybe
Serious.
no, seriously. Zoe's now a postdoc at UNSW.
Thank you, Julie. Yeah, so I was lucky enough to be awarded a sort of a PhD top-up scholarship through the Bureau of Meteorology and through the Centre of Excellence for Climate Extremes, which not only gave me some extra money, but also the fantastic opportunity to be supervised by a senior researcher here at the Bureau, and that ended up being Harry. So I did my PhD at Monash between 2018 to 2021. And so as Julie mentioned earlier, most of that was sort of online during the Melbourne sort of COVID lockdowns. And I think that was actually sort of nice because we actually sort of set up a regular meeting. So every Thursday at 9 a.m. through most of those lockdowns, we met every week. And that gave me a chance to sort of, I guess, absorb Harry's sort of unmatched knowledge of atmospheric dynamics and Australian climate variability, and also hear about his many adventures, fishing and renovations with floods and all different things. So the focus of my PhD was on the subtropical jet, which I've highlighted here. And this was one of 3 projects that Harry proposed at the very beginning, mostly because he felt that there's a real sort of lack of focus on the subtropical jet, despite its prominence in our region, as shown here, and the important role that it has for shaping weather and climate in the Southern Hemisphere. Oh, thank you. My laptop's died.
It looks good on the screen. Look
Oh,
at the screen.
okay.
Oh,
right.
okay. Okay.
Oh, that's just okay. Maybe we need to go
It's
back
not
to
on
that.
Maybe go back a couple.
I can't see anything on my screen.
Yeah,
Keep going back.
One more there.
Yeah, so I'm just going to give sort of a brief overview of the 3 papers that came out. That's okay on that one. I think that's different over there.
It's.
Oh, okay.
Really.
Don't know where to look. Of the 3 papers that came out of my thesis. And so in the first part of my PhD project, we looked at diagnosing interannual variations in the subtropical jet. And so we sort of came up with an index to describe the subtropical jet in the Australian region where it's strongest. And we found these 2 distinctly sort of different mechanisms to describe variations in its strength and its position. So we found that variations in the intensity of the subtropical jet could be largely linked to El Nino. And we found a sort of a side effect of this strengthened subtropical jet was also a weakening of the more poleward mid-latitude jet due to changes in sort of the propagation behaviour of waves. And then in contrast to that, we showed that the changes in the position of the subtropical jet could be linked to changes from an extratropical mechanism with the mid-latitude jet. So we find when that strengthens and moves poleward, again, there's changes in the way that the eddies propagate, and that promotes a equatorward shift of the subtropical jet. So Harry was always a very engaged and very sort of hands-on, I guess, supervisor. Oh, I'm saying the wrong thing, so I'll skip this. So because with Harry's excellent sort of knowledge of atmospheric dynamics, I was able to do lots of sort of dynamical analysis in both this paper and in the later papers, which I'll discuss, including look at sort of wave mean flow interactions to understand these dynamical mechanisms. And so, for example, I'm just highlighting here in my thesis, I looked at E vectors, and this is actually something that Harry developed as part of his own PhD thesis, this convention that he came up with, which was published in 1985.
Did he give you the Fortran code?
No, he did not. I had to code this up myself.
I don't think you could read Fortran, could you?
Yes, I did need your help with that. But yes, yeah, Harry was always a very sort of engaged and hands-on supervisor, and sort of regularly using this Climate Explorer website to sort of quickly test things that we were discussing or to prove his point in some ways. And so this is, showing some plots that Harry made using this website, which clearly sort of resembled the plots that I showed earlier. And I'm sure he was able to produce it much faster than I could using Python or NCL. So yeah, if you haven't come across this website, I definitely recommend you sort of follow Harry's lead and do some much faster analysis. No?
No, I was just thinking, I just saw Neville Nichols. And we learned about Climate Explorer from Neville Nichols.
Okay.
Back when he was our group leader. So
Oh, there you go.
Thank you,
Neville. It's a fantastic resource. Yeah, so then in the second part of my PhD, we then sort of moved on to understanding teleconnections from the Indian Ocean and in the Pacific Ocean into the Southern Hemisphere. And so this first part where we were looking at teleconnections from the Indian Ocean dipole were motivated by one of Harry's earlier papers where he examined sort of the existence of this wave train and how we can sort of get this teleconnection from the Indian Ocean when we know that the subtropical jet should act as a barrier for this stationary wave propagation. And so in this work, we sort of didn't necessarily say that this previous paper of Harry's, the hypothesis that they came up was false, but rather that sort of other mechanisms were more important. And we did this by using a novel modelling framework that enabled us to simulate the daily evolution of the response to suddenly switching on heating in the Eastern Indian Ocean. So these set of experiments are really nice because we end up with this really clean simulation of the height response, despite us using a full general circulation model. Most of it with sort of, nonlinear dynamics and moist processes. And most sort of previous studies have used more simplified models. And so with this nice setup, we were able to show for the first time that this Rossby wave train could propagate across this barrier that the subtropical jet imposes by burrowing underneath it. And finally, in the final part of my thesis, and so this was work that was sort of, worked on in the final stages of my candidature when sort of Harry had left the Bureau and he was still really engaged in this and enthusiastic, which was, I was most appreciative of. And so here we were looking at understanding sort of asymmetry between heating that's sort of located east or west of the dateline. And by using this same modelling setup, we were able to identify different sort of roles of a transient eddy feedback and different sort of propagation characteristics that sort of influence the establishment of the response. So I think I'll leave it there. And thank Harry once again for your excellent supervision and being a mentor. And your real dedication, even sort of after you left the Bureau officially, to still be there every Thursday at 9 AM without fail.
So as Julie said, I think that was really the only thing that got me through COVID was our regular meetings. And it was really a joy to interact with you. You were just fearless. You just went off. I would say I had to be careful what I said because you just go off and, get to the bottom of everything. So it was great. So I really enjoyed it.
Thanks, Zoe. Okay, so next we have Guomin Wang, who's also retired from the Bureau of Meteorology, but worked closely.
Yeah,
with
same day.
Same day.
So I had the pleasure of meeting Harry in person. It was both of us working at the old building, building at 700 Collins Street. So prior to that, I had known Harry's work for quite a long time because I cited his paper, you and maybe Hartmann's paper in my doctoral thesis. So at that time, so Harry was recognized a well-established climate scientist. So I feel very lucky to be able to see Harry in person. So this is why I had what's the word? I had harbored a desire to collaborate with Harry. That wish was fulfilled soon, so around the year 2006. So something happened. You can see it's a while. So around that time, so I had the time to spend more time focus more on climate prediction science, while still working on 101 seasonal prediction, so which was in Oscar's team. So what happened in so moving on to the next slide. So what happens was before roughly year 2000, so we had a view the stronger El Nino bring severe drought for Australian rainfall. So what happened in 2002 is not. So see, a not strong El Nino correspond to very severe drought, and very strong 1997 El Nino corresponding to a slightly wet rainfall. So that was a very.
There.
What was that?
They just muted someone.
Okay. So that was a very interesting scientific questions. So then it's a natural. So I spent some time thinking about this, and then talked to Harry about this. and Harry seems quite happy to spend time work on this subject. Move on. So we did a lot of analysis. So the papers, there's a lot of figures. So this is one of them. So EOF for SST. So what we see is EOF 1 to 4. So what you see is typical El Nino only explain half of the variability in terms of the spatial pattern. So, and each year, so this is a projection. So this is a projection each year, the principal component. So what happens in particular year, what the type of the ENSO was. So for example, for 1997, so these three components correspond to three patterns. So you clearly see dominant 1997 by the first one. And 2002, so dominant by pattern 3, which is this. So clearly, so this is we call flavors. So El Nino has not a single pattern, but many of them. So I forgot who use the flavors. No, not from us. So next one.
Kevin Trinberg.
Okay. All right. So then Harry, yeah, because Harry is a climate scientist, I am the same. So we usually use statistical correlation. So all rainfall over Australia in the spring season. So you see the strongest correlation rainfall with SFT is not with the Eastern Pacific, but is with Central Pacific. And the physical mechanism is a convection. So the convection is the strongest in this region because of climatological SFT plus the anomaly. So anomaly could be small, but on top of the higher SFT of this region, so it has a stronger influence on Australian rainfall. Next. So this is the last one. So the work published in this paper. So I particularly like, so I remember most of the writing was done by Harry. I couldn't do it at that time, of course. So this word, inter El Nino variation, means same thing as a flavor. So every El Nino has a different differences. So this paper, so cited by 297. So it wasn't highest, even wasn't in your top 10 or 20, but it was my second. And also this paper, so like herald the start of so-called ENSO, what's the word, diversity. So on this same year, there's 2 papers published on the same topic, so that it started like a new sub-area for ENSO diversity. And this collaboration with Harry, this is the first paper, so it had a profound lasting impact on my research quality for years that followed. So, and for example, so one example is, so the collaboration improved the quality of my research. So Harry consistently set a very high standard on research figures. So whenever I heard Harry praise a figure I produced as snazzy, I knew it met Harry's rigorous standard, quality control standard, and it's likely to be well received during paper review. It is true. It's true. So it's for all from that. So we published many other papers. So for several years leading up to his retirement, so Harry was an exceptional leader, supervisor, mentor, and a friend to me. So I incredibly grateful for guidance and support you provide. So for that reason, I thank you for like lucky some other people say lucky we have you, and wish you a good retirement, and thank you for everything.
Nice words. I would say the only mistake we made with that in-rail Nino papers, we didn't come up with the name El Nino Madoki. Somebody else came up with that name.
It's not a mistake, I think. It's a limitation. It's an evolution of science. We can foresee thing hasn't happened. Good. So Madoki and also is not popular today. It's other flavor or diagnostic.
Excellent. So we have, thanks, Guomin. We have one more talk in this session by Ming Feng, who's from CSIRO in Perth in Australia. Yep, you can wait. Thank you.
Yeah, hi. Thanks, Julia. Thanks. Hi, Harry. Hi, everyone. You can hear me okay, right?
Yes.
So yeah, maybe I wrote the slide a bit formal. So anyway, so I think I first met Harry in the 1990s, last century. I mean, so, during one of the Togakor kind of a project meetings. If people can still remember what Togakor is. I mean, so yeah. Anyway, so I moved to Australia in 1999. I think I then met Harry again, probably at one of the BMRC annual meetings in Melbourne. I think Raghu just said, I mean, Harry wasn't a IOD believer before that. I think at that meeting, I remember I did a presentation on IOD. I can't remember whether Yamagata was here or not. Anyway, after that, probably slowly kind of Harry became a believer. So next slide, please. Yeah, I don't know if Harry still remembers the picture. Remember everybody on the picture. But that's probably during one of your trips to WA, during these so-called WAMZ kind of conferences. So we would have the annual conference during 2006 and 11, I believe. I couldn't remember whether you took your bike to one of those trips. So anyway, I think in the early 2000, I would say there was still a barrier between oceanographers and meteorologists, probably in Australia. So we don't talk much to each other. I think Harry was the one that was willing to share knowledge with oceanographers. That's why I mean he and Gary Myers probably and myself kind of worked together to set up a climate research kind of node on the WAMZ. Kind of we got some reasonably kind of generous funding from WAMZ to do some Indian Ocean research. So then after that, we have collaborated under a Australia climate change science program to study the El Nino. I mean, that's another thing we have been working on probably for a while. And then lately, I mean, at the Center for Southern Hemisphere Oceans Research. I mean, what was the last? Harry wasn't formally involved in that, but he has been engaged a lot of kind of research topics for that program. Next slide, please. Yeah, I think I would share some WAMZ kind of deliveries from Harry and his colleagues, mainly the junior scientists from his team during that time. I didn't realize that Guomin has retired as well. So I think we were all kind of early career scientists during the WAMZ era. So I said now we are kind of approaching the retirement age as well. So I think, yeah, I would think these two works from WAMZ would be the highlight of Harry's contribution to the WAMZ or to the Indian Ocean and Western Australia kind of oceanography kind of research. On the left is Harry and Maggie use the Powell model to look at the Indian Ocean dipole prediction skills. So that's why I would say probably Gary was converted to a Indian Ocean dipole kind of believer probably in the early kind of 2000 kind of period. So anyway, so at that time, probably Palmer has a lot of kind of biases, and so I think the model scale probably was good. I mean, but probably the model has improved since then. So, but that work kind of laid some foundation for Indian Ocean dipole prediction kind of research. in the world. I would say. I mean, still, I mean, even for the current state-of-art model, we only can predict probably inertial dipole for no more than 2 seasons. I mean, that model probably still marginally can achieve that. On the right panel is the work Harry with Guomin, and they took the Power model to make a lunar current kind of prediction. You know that the Power model was a 2 degrees by 1 degree kind of resolution. I mean, if you so it doesn't have a lunar current. There's a vaguely there's a southern current. So, but they use a hybrid kind of technique. I mean, use the Fremantle sea level as a proxy for the lunar current strength. That's I did some work on that as well. So then they use the Power prediction of the Nino 3.4 and heat content anomaly northwest of Australia. So they use these two to make a statistical kind of prediction of the lunar current. The scale is quite good. I mean, it can reach probably 3 to 4 seasons. So that's the skill. I mean, the current kind of state-of-art model still need to kind of to beat. So I think that's a great achievement, well received by the WA kind of stakeholders on that. So the next one, please. So yeah, that's the Ninglo Nino. So I think Yamagata and myself probably coined this term Ninglo Nino. I think then Harry kind of joined the party with Andrew Marshall. We worked together on this paper to develop a theory. I guess so many Harry and Andrew's work probably to use the wind evaporation and ST feedback to explain the early onset of the Ninglo Nino. I think that's probably was a bit I would say rivalry with Yamagata. I guess he favors the story of the coastal Bieknix feedback mechanism. But anyway, the paper is reasonably well sounded, so people are kind of accept this idea how the during the trade wind kind of regime, how these kind of instability kind of mechanism can drive this kind of warming of the Western Australia coast. So on the right panel is a work that Harry helped us, my student Ning Zhang, the work on the marine heat waves of Western Australia coast. The lower panel is a so-called Ninglo Nino that occurred probably during the La Nina event as well, mostly. Also, I mean, probably the local factors can trigger that, like the west feedback and Yamagata's Bieknix feedback. So, but on the top panel, that's really Harry's contribution, I guess, to say that during El Nino years, the northern Australia experienced marine heat waves instead of La Nina. So during La Nina probably is a Western Australia coast, but during the El Nino is a northern Australia. So the reason is that for that is the weakened MJO and a weakened Australian monsoon. I think he and the student developed some theory on that. So that was a well cited paper on the WA kind of marine heat waves. So next one, please. Now the seashore. So seashore is a 5-year project. So I think Harry helped one of my postdoc, Andy. I mean, so I don't think he's online. So so I think, yeah, I'll just highlight one work that he did with Harry. So they use the XSS1 model. So the new Bureau model. To assess the sensitivity of diurnal variability of the in terms of SST, air-sea heat flux, mixed layer, etc., on the vertical resolution of the model. So I think Harry devised this kind of smart way to make the top 10 meters kind of well mixed during the model run. So you test the sensitivity, which proves that 1 meter resolution is important to resolve this diurnal cycle and its associated air-sea heat flux and air-sea coupling. So I think the 1 meter resolution is pretty much adopted by the seasonal forecast kind of centers nowadays. So I think during that work, probably the model is simulation is less sensitive to the coupling frequency. I believe that's probably 3 hours or hourly. I mean, probably it's not that sensitive. So I'll just leave it there. So for the rock panel, so we designed a field work of the northwest shelf to measure the air-sea heat flux in that region. So we use a cluster of fast profiling kind of flows and a air-sea flux modeling. We published a paper in BAMS. I think Harry was a co-author on that one, but Harry was instrumental to help us to design that experiment. Unfortunately, probably during COVID, I think my postdoc has left early. I mean, to return Taiwan, so we didn't kind of quite finish some of the planned work we were thinking. So anyway, so next slide, I guess it would be the final one. So yeah, there's a few. I think Harry helped our kind of postdoc Evan Weller during WAMC, and we have a few kind of publications together during the years. I guess, I mean, one thing I should say, the Nino for West, that's the term that was coined in the Andrew Marshall kind of paper. So it's not as popular as the other terms. So we hope, I mean, so the community will pick up that up. So it's not a kind of well-cited kind of term in the community yet. So I think below is a quote from WAMC. The ability to provide seasonal predictions of the diurnal current has a great potential for improved management of WA marine environment. That's a high kind of a statement from the WA kind of government or stakeholders. So Harry, thanks for your help over the years to help me coach all the junior kind of scientists in WA. And I hope you enjoy your retirement years. And if there's any kind of a topic or ideas, and we can probably still kind of try to drive a paper or two, I guess, in the future. And I wish I'll be in Melbourne. I can join you and Sharon on maybe you are still doing the mushroom collecting in your bushwalk trips. So I hope I will be there too for that. So thank you.
Say one thing. Hey, thanks, Ming. That was really nice. Well, two things. Early on, you showed the picture of Gary Myers, and his contribution to especially our seasonal prediction capability here is just people may not appreciate it, but I was really looking forward to working with Gary in WAMC, and unfortunately, his illness became worse, and we never got a chance. But he's the one who really got us going on WAMC, so it was at least it was good that he got us going. The other comment I wanted to make was I think I'm being hard done by here. I'm not skeptical. I was not skeptical of the IOD originally. What I was skeptical of was whether the IOD was independent of ENSO. And you remember those early papers, that was the conclusion that the Yamagata group made, really bold statement that this is this thing that's completely independent of ENSO. And I never believed that. I don't believe that today. I do believe maybe today that there is, the Indian Ocean can make its own variability, but it's not there's a huge component is being forced by El Nino. So that's just I wasn't skeptical about a dipole in the Indian Ocean.
Great, thank you, Ming. And so we are running a little bit behind schedule, but I'm going to cut the big boss's talk a little bit short. So we'll have now a 4-minute break, just for anyone who needs to get up and stretch, and then we'll be back online in 4 minutes. So 4:08.
Fast. So what happened with the team? Sorry, just.
I don't know what's keep it was on my screen or was it blank? I don't know. Yes, during self again. Yeah, during surveys. I couldn't see anything on my phone. Concerning. And then luckily that was at the end of that process escape came back, but I don't know why.
Pausing in the break.